Everybody, welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, more or less every weekday, we take on one typical dilemma that people face at work, and we can get the questions often from you. And in this case, well, I'm Roy, for those who haven't been here before, startup investor in the future of work. In this case, Collin and I started this conversation on Twitter, I think, and just where it's like, okay, let's go talk about it here. And Collin is a designer and entrepreneur. He can tell us a little bit more about his business now. And the question today is, as we move to, at least in some roles, to different ways of working where we're not in person or we're only in person some of the time, what are the ways that emerge to keep people engaged? Not just, doing their jobs well and productive, but feeling part and parcel of the thing. And Collin, thank you for joining us. Would love to hear any and all perspectives that you have.
Yeah, Roy, thanks for having me. Well, I've really experienced this problem quite dramatically over the last maybe few months, but I would say, building a company's culture at a very early stage is important, really internalizing it and being able to communicate that really effectively to the small group of people that you're working with is really important because they have to buy into what your company culture is. If they don't buy into that, they will always be disengaged. It doesn't matter if you've got like the coolest new, SaaS tool to like play games and to like, chat in virtual worlds. That doesn't mean anything. If they're not bought into why they're there, how they're supposed to behave, the behaviors that get rewarded, if they don't buy into that, they're not going to be engaged no matter what you do.
And how do you, would love to hear the context of your current organization in terms of like the team and what you do. So I think that a lot of leaders probably listen to that and start nodding along and thinking like, yeah, of course they have to be engaged. And then, they're used to describing the mission to the team and telling new hires about it. Yet somehow, despite those techniques, it seems to fall flat once people get in the day-to-day of working. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts on techniques that could be valuable for ensuring that people are bought into that, are aligned on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So every company wants to have integrity, excellence, be honest. Those are all the kind of platitudes that every company has, right? But what is it that makes you unique and different? And how can you authentically communicate that to your team members? And so you showing up and understanding the humanity of that team member and being able to communicate that is going to be enough to get them locked in.
I love that.
Where they really want to just be like, I really like what this company is about. I like the leadership. I like this problem that we're trying to solve. And, I get a lot of value out of just being here. And it doesn't mean obviously compensation and benefits are a part of that, right? But it's really truly valuing those people and being able to communicate that just through, the way that you operate as the leader, because that permeates through the organization.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think that there are different kinds of organizations. I don't think there's one size fits all, of course. But what I mean by that is I've seen organizations where the style for getting people to buy in is the charismatic, I hate to use a war metaphor, but I'm intentionally using it here for better or for worse, like the Braveheart type model of the person who rides their horse in front of the group and says charge and has a certain kind of personality who tends to work with them, who is into that. And then, there's another kind, and you alluded to this a little bit when we were just preparing beforehand, which hands power to individuals and allows them to continuously choose and say, look, I think Zappos on some level did this when they said, hey, you just went through training, we'll pay you $2,000 to quit. And, the idea of ensuring that people are on board by giving the genuine opportunity to vote with their feet, not just if you don't like this, you can leave, kind of thing, feels like part of it. And I'm also curious, before your business life, you were if I'm not mistaken, a champion figure skater. And so in your athletic life, what lessons there are about, being aligned and how to remain engaged? Because a lot of that, I'm sure, was inner work.
Yeah, those were some of the most, I always had a coach. So from 10 years old to 21, pursuing an Olympic dream, you always have someone that is coaching you. So one of the things that I learned from that was being self-motivated and self-directed and having your own goals. And so, it worked well, especially in a remote and distributed team, because, like it's easier to set the tone that way. You don't necessarily need like any kind of external validation or external kind of motivation to make you do things. And for us, I think that like it does have an impact on the company. So for like my company that works in this area of the future of work, particularly on like, standardizing services and making it easy for businesses to buy them, like we actually have to work with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, and you're not always in the same room. So that person has to be genuinely motivated by like just the goal, just their own personal development, just their own ways of defining themselves. And like we've been able to attract those types of people. But I think it just generally comes from like my background in sports.
I love that. I mean, it makes me think that, that line horses for courses about how you just have to adapt the specific solution to the circumstances. And my favorite book by a computer science professor is Creativity Inc. By Ed
Yes.
Catmull, who
Yes.
was one of the co-founders of Pixar. And the thing that I love about it is not that he came in and said like, here's my ideology about how everything works. And we're just and look, I was right. It's not like Tony Hsieh was like, happiness is the ideology and look how well it worked. This guy, I mean, really what I took from it was a constant process of adaptation of thinking, well, where is my workforce now? What are they worried about? What are they thinking about? How do we invent solutions that bring them the motivation and sense of involvement that we want them to have, given what we specifically are doing? And it involves everything. It involves geography. It involves the composition of the workforce. It involves what the company does. And it's going to be different for, a fashion label, a sports team, movie production company anchored in animation technology, and whatever organization people are working with out there.
Like even for us, like we have people from Canada, the United States, the UK, Vietnam, India, Israel, Africa. And so even in that context too, you're dealing with cultures, experiences, and narratives that they all bring to a working organization. So for me, like I find that, understanding those kind of experiences and narratives, and in a way kind of personalizing their experience within the organization, still within the mission, but understanding their uniqueness allows them to be engaged as well too, because they feel like they're a part of something in their own way.
Yeah, I think that's really that level of empathy for a group and attempt to understand is a really powerful tool in the leader's toolbox. Anything you want to add, Collin, before we wrap today?
Thanks for having me. I mean, I love your tweets. I love your insights. I'm happy to be on the podcast. And I would say I welcome you out to Asia.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that I'm trying to spend less time on the road now that things are opening back up, and just remember the glories of spending nights with my family, and just try to do that as often as possible. But I do appreciate it. Every time I've gone, it's been a step forward in my life's wisdom and experience. And so these are the trade-offs, what an author who I respect and most calls right versus right choices. Great to come to Asia, expand horizons. Also great to be, home with my wife and my kids. And just, I think this conversation has been a perfect example for those who are watching for the first time of why we call this is not advice. Because we're not trying to tell you there's some generic way that works in every situation to engage a team. We're trying to say, here are a few different ways of thinking about it that may involve different circumstances. One of the reasons, Collin, I was really eager to do this with you is you've had such different life experiences from my experiences, from the industry that you've in to the countries where you've lived. I mean, all that stuff. And so I really appreciate that. I think it's another way in which diversity of all kinds proves that what we can do is get smarter answers to questions because we bring different experiences to bear. So I would love to have you back and do this again. It'd be a lot of fun. And you just let me know when you have other questions. I wish that we had more of an excuse to talk about us investing in what you do, but nature of discipline is we're trying to be focused.
Of course.
And to be continued. Thank you.
Absolutely.